Great to have people of all range of ages here too. Great to have kids here, I reckon it's really good. In all reality, that shows a commitment to me, to someone who wants to learn about business, and hats off, because it's easy enough to say, oh, I couldn't get here, I couldn't get a babysitter, so thank you. People use that all the time. What we're going to do tonight, I'm going to introduce the panel here, is just we've created these forums, and forums are really about how can we help our clients improve their businesses, but then they extend to that, how can they improve their lifestyle? Because the reality is, we have a business to help serve our lifestyle. We don't have a business because it's actually, oh, I've got a business owner, I'm a hero. That's not the case. It's there to service our lifestyle. And fundamentally, we have three things that we can leverage our business through. We can leverage it through people, technology, and systems. And when I say people, the reality is, and we can say this in a safe environment here, is if they weren't going to be useful for us on a day-to-day level and help us make more money, we wouldn't have people in our business, would we? Because there's no other good reason to have them. Now, from a commercial point of view, they give us all the headaches of the world, they want things, they get sick, they annoy me, they don't turn up, they do turn up sometimes, which is equally as bad. Somebody wish you weren't there. All this happens. That's the reality of us being in business. And so from a leverage point of view, we have people so we can leverage through people. We can leverage through technology, so things like, well, you might have a backer, you might have some software, whatever it is technically. And then the third part is we leverage through systems. This is where it connects it. If we're going to have people, we've got to have systems around that, and we've got to connect the two together. So our view very much is that there's the humanisation of a business and the systemisation. We try to systemise the routine and humanise the exceptions, because there's always going to be one or two things or more that actually aren't within that box we create. But for most of us, 80% of things are line and length. They happen, we deal with it, away we go, next. But then there's always the ones that pop up. So tonight we really want to focus on getting the most out of that systemised part of the business. And I guess I'm going to ask a little bit of permission here at the moment too. To that end, we've probably got all fantastic war stories about the worst employee we ever had. This bloke did this, you couldn't believe what happened. And it's somewhere between the sublime and the ridiculous, these stories. By all means use them tonight if they help the question. But if we keep them tight, that's always helpful too, because some of the stories can go on for a little bit, and it's okay if we do get off track at all, because it's easy enough to happen. We might just pull back if that's okay with everyone. So that's what we're here for tonight to talk about. The reason why we have these sessions is because we know there's accountants and advisors. We don't go to courses to learn about being in business. I was just looking at Dale before, and he's done one son's at uni and one's 30-year apprenticeship. So you're going to spend 3 or 4 years doing an apprenticeship, or 3 or 4 years at university to learn your skill. Then you get plonked with this fact that you're actually in business. And how did this happen? Just because I was good at my skill, I ended up being the business owner. It's not, and therefore everyone expects you to know everything. You become the oracle. So our idea as a business is to try to help everyone and try to help business owners have better businesses, but so they have better lifestyles. Okay, so that's our principle, why we do what we do. Tonight what we've got with us is, this is horrible. I said I can't hide. We've got 3 with us here, Michael Osborne, Anita Jardine and Pablo Villela. Now, many of you will know 1, 2 or 3 of these people sitting in front of me. I'm just going to read a little bit, if that's okay, a bit of background on each of the 3, just so we can make sure we can pick that out. Anita, so Anita's the one in the middle, for those who haven't worked that out. And Anita's the principal of Jardine HR, which is a business based here in Sunbury. Anita's background was working in corporate HR and up in about 2016, jumped the fence and said, okay, I really want to do something with small business because I believe there's a need in small business to understand HR, and it's a growing risk to your business. So Anita's business is based here in Sunbury. She has clients primarily through Sunbury, Macedon Ranges, and in Melbourne. And we'll have a few questions. We've got a few questions submitted tonight already. We're going to ask, and Anita's going to be the oracle of all things HR. Some of the things she actually specialises in are PD, so position descriptions, mediation services. Actually, have meditation services, but we'll go for mediation. Employee performance management systems, and employee contracts, and understanding awards. Because who has to deal with awards in here? Who likes dealing with awards in here?
Reading them?
No. Interpreting them?
So, but that's the reality. Who has an EB in here? Who just pays whatever they think? Thanks, Rob.
At least you're honest. Thank you.
Over the left there, well, you're right, is Pablo Villela. Pablo actually is a financial planner with a Cambo Private Wealth, and many of you know Pablo is also one of our key planks of Sage Wealth Management here, which helps a lot of clients with investing and planning and the like. Actually, before Pablo's life at Cambo, he worked with IPAC, which was a brainchild of Paul Clitheroe. For those who are a little bit older, may remember him as the first man to actually be the guru of all things Money Magazine and the Money TV show. So Pablo learned his trade from Paul Clitheroe and the like. The reason why Pablo's here tonight is one of the greatest risks you have with people in business is ourselves and our key people. And Pablo's got some really good concepts and done some amazing things with some clients about how you can mitigate some of that risk around your business, because the reality is, look there, Chris and Simon, the two biggest risks in their business are both sitting right here. So, and there's a couple of questions we've got here around situations which may be relevant to some. No, it will be relevant to some, no question. And so Pablo will be able to walk us through some financial aspect of how that actually works. Last and far from least, Michael Osborne here on the left. Everyone will know, probably everyone will know Michael. He's the CEO here at Sage and one of the directors. And he's a very good man in business. So good in business, the fact that last year he was named the Hume City Council Business Leader of the Year. Is that right?
Something like
I'm
that.
really proud of it too. Just got really natural to him to stand up and the other. Most of you probably know, this is the reality is, most of you probably know that those awards are a bit poxy, because generally speaking, as a,
Thank you.
Here's a HR issue, right?
generally
Practical example.
they're self-nominated, you know, people say, vote for me, you put, I have to do my nomination, all that sort of stuff, vote for me. The reality is that Hume's, that award last year was actually a complete shock to Michael, because he doesn't know who nominated him, he doesn't know, he didn't put any applications in, it was actually done by a panel who made a selection around Hume as to what he did, as with this business here, with some really like small businesses, and the wider Hume City Council. So it wasn't the classic, everyone on the night was saying, oh, it's such a surprise, really you applied for it yourself. This was a genuine surprise to Michael, so that's how, and one of the reasons he's here tonight, yes, to talk through some contractor and employee issues, but also the coalface. We've got a team here of 20, and he can talk to us about what it really means to be in business, and okay, got these HR issues, how do you deal with it at a practical level? Because the book says one thing, but the people don't say the same thing the book always says. So that's the reason we have the panel up here ready to go. We want you to ask questions. You may have some pressing questions. I've got a bunch of them here. So we want to do like a forum style tonight, and probably a reason everyone came, they've got something in your mind. So please, let's work our way through it and enjoy the night. We'll just have a good time together. At the end of it all, there's going to be an opportunity to get a one-on-one meeting, if that's what you want, if you want to take up that up. So there might be some specific issues. We might park those, it's such a modern word these days. We'll park it and then we'll reach out. That's what we all do. So we're going to park the issues and keep the night moving, okay? So with that, we might actually lead off. It's okay, we've had a couple of questions sent in. And the first one, can I ask just around the room? Everyone employs in the room, I'm assuming? Yeah. Is everyone happy with everyone who's working for them?
Yep. Yeah. Took me 3 years, but yep.
Yep. Everyone? For those who are happy with everyone who works for them, can you please put your hand up? Yeah, awesome. No, that's great because we need, people are so important in our business. They make our business what it is. They make our culture, they make who we are. So one of the questions we've got here right from the start, and I want to hit up to, I want to actually hit up to Michael for a start, is we can implement all the policies, safeguards, everything we want, but there's a chance that we'll have a rogue employee who'll try to take us for anything. Can I do anything about that?
Rogue employee. Yes, we can do something with that. Obviously, the obvious answer is to make sure you've got your policies and procedures. I'm a big believer if it's in writing, it'll stop the fighting, most of the time. But it does come down to interpretation a lot of the time. So yeah, have your policies strong, have your insurances in place, that whether it be public liability or things like that. If someone's going to have a go at you, that's pretty generic sort of stuff. I suppose ultimately though, if you want to be able to put your head down at night and know that if someone has got an endless pocket and goes to have a go at you, and they do win, you want to make sure that your assets are protected. And that just means that here we're very big on not having any of your valuable assets in the entity in which you're doing the trading through. And that's, your assets could be your physical assets such as your equipment, buildings, and even down to cash. You know, a lot of people like to see their bank account build up. So what we try to do is go, let's structure those assets in the most tax effective and asset effective way, and so that if something does happen, you can say, well, this company's got no asset for you to sue, and move on. Now, you'd like to think that it doesn't get to that extent, but hey, it's a bit like with my kids. I know them pretty well, but I know who they're going to hook up with. So therefore, you know, be prepared and just structure your assets so that they're safe. To me, that's...
And you've actually seen that actually happen over here with, in real life examples of clients who have had situations with creditors or employees where they've actually been able to protect their assets.
Yeah, they've been able to just, I suppose, just, obviously, you don't, I'm not saying, you know, abdicate your responsibilities. No. But if it comes to it, then yeah, we've had some people just say, well, that's fine, you can sue the company, but I, as a director, have got no assets. We do a lot of work of having, say, the at-risk spouse in a relationship. They may be the director, but all the other assets, whether it be homes, any type of assets, are in the name of the non-risk spouse.
So you talked about to keep your equipment like safe. So how do you do that?
You could actually have the equipment owned in another entity and just rent from one entity to another.
Okay.
What you've got to be careful of is PPSR, which is a personal property securities register now. You've got to make sure that those assets you register. It's just another bit of red tape. You register those assets as you being the beneficial owner of those assets. And especially for trading, I've seen they might have excavators and they'll go and leave their excavators or equipment or some tools on site. And if that company goes into liquidation, then they could actually take that equipment unless you've got your PPSR register right. So there's some things to do, but you've got to these days dot I's and cross T's. So yeah, rent the equipment across to, and sometimes personnel. You can have your people. You have all your infrastructure, I suppose, to run your business in one entity, and you might have a company that just employs people, and then just so if anyone gets sued, it's in that employment company, if you like. There's ways and means, and no one size fits all. It's we need to have a chat with you, see what assets you've got and what you need to protect.
So we're on disgruntled employees. I'll go to you, Anita.
You're not going to completely different answers. Yeah. But I don't know about assets.
Yeah, that's right. No, we do the assets. So can disgruntled employees contact Fair Work anonymously?
Absolutely.
And what would happen there? If they contact Fair Work, would that lead to an audit, and how would that play out?
What would normally happen is if an employee contacted Fair Work Australia, regardless of what the situation is, whether they felt they were being underpaid, they were being bullied, something like that, they had a query, what the first thing Fair Work would ask them is, does your company have policies and procedures in place? Do they have employment contracts? If the answer was yes and yes, they would turn around and say, well, I suggest that you go back through the process that your employment contract dictates you do, because we're dealing with an employer now that's actually got a system in place, so go back and follow that process. If in effect then nothing comes of that process and you're still disgruntled, I suppose, you could probably go back there, but normally they would push it back onto the employer. And if you've got everything in place and it's current and up to date and legislatively okay, then you're okay.
So then if
you follow that process.
So if it did come to an audit, what is the stuff that they'd be looking for?
Well, depending upon what the complaint was,
Yep.
If someone said I'm being underpaid, and that's rife in the media right at the moment,
Yep.
the first thing they would look at is to make sure that all your employees are being paid correctly. So that's correct interpretation of any award you happen to be under, and you could have several different employees. And I was talking to Taryn before, and she said, I've got 9 employees. Now, they could be all doing something very different, and they could be under 1, 2 or 5 different awards. So you'd have to be on top of each one of those awards and making sure that you're paying your staff correctly. Now, one of the biggest awards is construction on site, and it's as convoluted as it possibly, and I can see a lot of nodding of it, it's so convoluted, and that's one of the things my clients, I deal a lot with tradespeople, and just interpreting that award properly with all the allowances and on-site allowances and paying this and paying that, it's constant. And if you're not on top of it, that's the first thing they'd be looking at. And sometimes I'll deal with clients that genuinely have missed it, not intentionally, but because that's not their area of expertise.
So in terms of those awards then, how do we keep on top of those awards? Because they're changing too regularly, really.
Yeah, they're talking now about simplifying the awards, because you really have to be like a Rhodes Scholar to pretty much understand them, because they're written by lawyers and written by, people that... Everything's so litigious these days, so they have to make it as black, as constant as they possibly can. But people that work with me, if something changes in their awards, I let them know. I'd send out communications to say, please have a look at X in the award. This has changed as of July 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'll keep the
So
clients
beyond
informed.
that, are there references of Fair Work that we can go to
Yeah,
get that information?
you can go onto the Fair Work website and join their mailing list and put in what awards you come under, and they'll send out alerts.
I'd say, just so you know, that's probably an action
Yeah.
taken tonight. To reach the mailing list of Fair Work.
Yeah.
Yep, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. What's sorry, open? Does anyone have any questions that are pressing? I've got a bunch more questions here, but what is something you've got really relevant that you want to ask about your own business?
If an award changes, if something in the award changes, what do you then have? Do you have rights for certain things if you don't not agree with, but
No.
if your business doesn't
No.
follow, you just
No, unfortunately. The way that the world works really is that it starts with federal law, then state law, and then we have awards and agreements and ABAs, and you have to follow those. If they change, you have to follow suit,
Yeah.
because it's legislative. You might not like it,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's
as
just
they
the
are,
way it is. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
So what about then for businesses that don't have documents, like they don't have employee contracts, role definitions? What risk are they taking?
The risk is when you're trying to do some sort of performance management. If you've got a staff that you're disgruntled with, or they're disgruntled, or they turn around to you and say, "That's not in my job description. I'm not getting paid enough to do that." Well, unless that's succinctly documented and everybody agrees and signs off on it, then you can have those conversations. And certainly with employee contracts, it saves a lot of argument. By law, you don't have to have an employment contract. I'll state that straight up. However, it just makes life a lot easier if something does go wrong or somebody leaves or you terminate somebody, because there's so many handshake agreements to say, well, I was told that I was given a car when I leave. I was allowed to take that car. I was allowed to take that mobile phone. I'm allowed to take that number. Oh, no, he said that I was allowed to have that. Now, if you have not got that in writing, then you quite happily can take that away. If it is in writing, then it saves the argument and it saves a bit of bad blood at the end. But it just sets down the parameters for when things turn a little bit trickly, that there is an answer to any argument you're ever going to have.
I might actually bring in one of those ones I've had this later, but it's probably perfect, is grey areas. Ask Michael this one, employee, contractor, your favourite topic?
Yeah, we've got another 3 hours. Yeah, we get a lot of questions, I suppose, about can I just pay someone as a contractor? I don't have to worry about paying superannuation and work cover and things like that. Short answer, no. Well, it could be yes, but you've got to jump through a lot of hoops and a lot of things first to essentially, I'd say Fair Work Australia, if you get a bulletin from there, would it be fair to say it's going to be written from the employee's point of view? Fair Work?
No.
No? That's good, because I'm used to.
Look, I think they have to be fair across the board. I know that they are generally skewed employee. Yeah. However, 9 times out of 10 when I've walked into Fair Work to represent somebody, it's pretty rare that the employee... It depends on the argument.
Yeah.
So
I think there too, so if it's employee and a contractor, there's things that, there's Fair Work obviously that look at it, but then the ATO look at it. And superannuation look at it, and work cover and payroll tax. So, and if you get picked up on one of those, guess what? You'll have a knock on the door from each of those other areas straight after to say you should have included your contractor as an employee and therefore paid super, work cover and payroll tax on that. So they'll look at things like, is the worker getting paid an hourly rate on a regular basis? Do they have the ability to get someone else in to help them, or is it really them doing the work for you and really no one else? Are they a business at large? In other words, they've got maybe a company. Can they employ someone else and have 2 or 3 other people on their books as well? They'll look at, there's about 5 or 6 different areas. So they're a wake up to employing someone as a contractor. Hey, just give me an invoice, get an ABN, give me an invoice. They'll actually go and include all those, and you'll be up for work cover and all the things that an employee is entitled to under Fair Work. Well, they'll be covered as well.
Sorry. Simon and I have a roof plumbing business, and we have subcontractors working for us. So at what point do they become employees for what point? So we've had them working for us for quite a while.
There's no line in the sand. There's no, like, if you work 180 days or anything like that.
Well, it's been over 12 months.
Yeah,
they've been subcontractors. Do they become employees?
What are they roof plumbers like?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, there's a whole lot of questions that we could probably park that question.
do they supply their own materials, or they just turn up and get paid an hourly rate?
Labour only, tools only.
Yeah, I'd have a chat to someone.
So technically, if you asked me that question, I'd say they're actually employees.
Okay, but this is on
the surface. Yeah.
Okay, and for what period do they have to have been with us or working for us? For how long until they are classified as employees?
5 minutes. Straight away.
5 minutes.
Really?
It's a.
Yep.
Yeah, it depends on the nature of the work. Depends on, as Michael and I just said, at face value, that's what we would say. But probably having a longer discussion with you about who, what, when, where, how, and why would give you an absolute.
There's lots of things like rectification tests. If they stuff up, who fixes it? Do you just have? Do you cover it, or do they have to go and do it at their own expense? All those sort of things come into it.
You know, do they wear your logo? Do they?
Yep.
Are they? Do you tell them where to go on a daily basis?
Does that mean they are or they're not?
Yeah.
They are what, employees? Okay. If they wear your logo?
Depending on the situation, yeah.
That doesn't mean just because they wear the logo?
No, there's a whole lot.
Yeah.
If they're treated like every other employee that you've got, then chances are they are an employee.
But if they could be a company with their own workers and everything, and they wear your logo, that's different.
But it just depends, yeah, there's a whole lot of depends around that. I'm
Okay.
happy to chat to you later.
Yep.
If we have contractors, which we don't, but
Yeah,
occasionally, we have to make sure that they've got their own public liability.
Yes.
cover.
yeah.
Yeah.
And make sure it's your responsibility that their ABN is up to date,
Yeah.
because if it isn't, it comes back on you that you should have deducted tax, and some people charge GST when they shouldn't, and some people don't charge GST when they should. So it's your responsibility to make sure the ABN is correct.
It absolutely, what if I get most questions, but so did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
So, if someone doesn't have an employment contract, and then they say, "Oh, I should have been paid under such and such an award," and you go to the award, and they're meant to have been paid $25 an hour, and you've been paying them $30 an hour, are they then responsible for paying you back because they've been paid?
Sadly not. Well,
No.
no,
So they okay.
no.
Can you then reduce their pay?
But if I've
back?
been paying them
No.
$25 an hour and they meant to be paid $30 an hour, then I am responsible
Yes,
for paying
yeah.
them.
But you can grandfather that $30 forever and a day. So
Yeah, but
they'll never get another pay rise again, by the sounds of that.
but that is the
It is the
reality of the
skew.
situation.
Yeah.
So if someone claims an award when they didn't have an employment contract,
But
and
the
they've
thing
been
I'll-
being overpaid, then
But what I'll ask you is, are they actually talking the right award? Because there's a lot of my clients I talk to, and they'll think that they're under one particular award, and they actually fall under another, and vice versa. So,
but if at the end of the day they have found the
If it's
correct
right.
award is found, yeah, then
Okay, so
that's a bonus for them.
yeah.
But
they're not-
unfortunately,
they
if
have
it's
to
the
pay
other
it
way
back
around.
to me. Yeah.
But as I said, you would just keep it at that rate forever and a
maybe
day.
on $30 an hour for a while.
Yeah,
Understood.
yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, so in our situation, right, so we've got two subcontractors.
Yep.
Do they have to have their own public liability insurance?
It's not really just they have to, but they'd be wise.
Yeah.
But if they're employees, aren't they fall
If they're,
under?
if they're
Yeah.
deemed
Fall under
employees, well then they're covered by you.
They're covered by you.
But that's what, but
That
we
means
haven't,
you have to
we
pay
haven't
them.
But
employed
they're
them.
sole traders that invoice us weekly
Mm.
for their
So-
labour only. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
So that,
So do they need public liability?
well, it sounds like they're probably perhaps,
Because-
whether an employee first,
Yeah.
before you start to
Exactly.
make public liability
If they were
question.
true, fall under the true banner of contractor, yes, then it's their responsibility
What
to
is
have
the
all
true
of
banner
those.
of contract? Understand it?
Exactly what we were saying before. If
There
they,
is no.
like I'm a contractor,
Mm.
so I can hire other people to do work for me if I was working for you, if I needed stuff done. I don't use your premises, I don't use any of your tools or equipment. It's like having an accountant. We're,
Yeah.
we're virtual people, so.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
So in that case, like, I got some subcontractor, they work for me. I have my company public liability insurance. They have not their own subcontractors, like that guys. So if there anything happen, does my public insurance cover any problem if we have?
Potentially not is the answer. So I can't define say no, I can't define say yes, I can say potentially not.
and potentially yes.
So
Yeah.
in that case,
So you've got to
in
know
that case, they
someone.
should have on their own insurance, yeah?
Well, they
You
should.
must, yeah.
That's the
So
proof.
that's why I
Everyone
asked you.
should.
Yeah.
Yes.
If,
So that's
if
the
you,
point.
if you wanted to prove to anyone that they are a real contractor, you'd be asking them to do that and
Yeah,
looking at those
so save
5
my
or 6
side, yeah.
different things
Yeah.
to say, well, that's what, if you want to be a true contractor, they're the things you've got to
Yeah.
satisfy.
so I contract for Foxtel,
Yeah?
so I have to wear uniform.
Mm.
They tell me what to do, when to do it, all that sort of stuff. I've got my own public liability
Yeah.
insurance, everything. But then I can't employ another contractor to do that work. It has to go through them. So is that then contractor or an employee? Because I know they go through a lot of
Yeah.
compliance stuff and they'll, a lot of checks. Every 12 months they check with me. where I work if I
Depends on what
contract to other people.
Yeah,
That's an interesting one, because a lot of the things you're saying there
yeah.
would point to the fact that you're an employee,
Yeah.
but they make you set up in a company and they don't pay you super or anything like that. So,
Sorry,
no.
they don't pay your super?
No.
No.
That's a loophole. Yeah.
So I would suggest that they would have spent a little bit of time and money researching that,
Yeah.
and they would have an answer. I'd love to know what their answer was.
Yeah, so would I.
Because what they said, and that could have been, and that's a good example, don't take it for gospel, because that could have been set up 15 years ago or 20 years ago when Foxtel was starting to do that, but the landscape's changed. And now some of the ATO and those government bodies, they look behind any corporate veil, any companies or any other structures. They'll look behind that and say, no, that's an employee. They should be paid too.
BSA as a subcontractor for Foxtel, they got a fine a couple of years ago, I think, for many millions of dollars, I think, because of that, because they weren't paying certain taxes.
I'm sure they'd be looking at it. Foxtel would be getting people to look at it, but it's that's how silly it is. That's
So
you
that's
would think that
still
you're
a contractor, even though it, for face value, it would look as an employee.
One of the really cool things you can do is on the ATO website, there's a questionnaire you can jump on, and actually, if you answer it authentically, you are, from a tax office point of view, allowed to rely upon that, but you need to answer it genuinely, answer it.
Yeah.
The other trick that gives you though, I believe, is it tells you if you fail the test, if you become an employee, okay, what do I have to change to be a contractor?
Yeah.
It may be the way you're getting paid. It might be like rather than an hourly rate, paid on a job basis. Are you responsible for rectification? That's a massive one. So the basic thing is, if something goes wrong on the job, who's taking the risk?
Yeah.
So, sorry, if they are like,
The more risk is taken, the more likely to be the contractor.
So in your case, if you
So if I'm working for you, right? If I take more risk, I'm always going to be a contractor. If all my risk is passing over to you, I'll work with the characteristics of an employee.
so rectification,
Yeah, so your case, if you said, instead of getting paid an hourly rate, guys, there's a house there and it's worth $4,000. I don't care who you employ to do it,
How long it
and
takes.
how long it takes or whatever it is, or I want it done, it's $4,000 and I want it done by the end of this week.
yeah,
If you need to go and employ someone else, and if it's stuffed up, you
that's
come back and
contracting
fix
the
it
work,
up.
yeah.
And if they're doing, again, if they're doing work for other people as well, that's adding to them being a contractor.
Understood, yeah.
That's interesting.
providing
services and you're providing consultancy, like in a situation like that, from a contractor's point of view.
Yeah, so hold very similar to that. The rules are still similar. The services, contracting, whatever, the same principles still apply around this. Who is wearing the ultimate risk?
But there's no real risk in that. If you're providing consultancy services, and the way I do it, my lifestyle,
Yeah, I suppose the way you do it, though.
that's true. We're
so
advising
managing
you
your risk.
what to do. No,
You're getting paid for a result or an hourly rate?
neither.
Neither.
Yeah.
But you're getting paid, they're expecting something for
Yeah,
what you're doing.
We're consulting our services and consultancy under a key personnel contract.
Yeah.
Company contracts with key personnel of the company. We provide consultancy services.
They might be looking for a result there as opposed to an hourly rate.
Because you've got a particular contract which actually goes through some specific issues that create that contractor type arrangement. I'll maybe talk to you one-on-one because I might be very particular to you, some of those issues you've got. Yeah. Cool. I might just segue a little bit. Pablo's been sitting there, and that's Pablo. For those who haven't met Pablo, nice kebab. Pablo Villela. But one of the questions we got coming into this, and this concept of this session was around risk. It's all well and good to say our employees present a risk or our contractors present a risk to our business. But potentially, as I said before, Simon and Chris, the greatest risk to their business is the two blokes sitting right in here. The greatest risk for Benny's business is Benny, in so many ways. But the greatest risk to Dale's business is Dale, right? Sharon, it's quite often it's yourself who's the greatest risk. And Pablo's done a lot of work in that space. So, Pablo, one of the questions I did have here for you was about key people in your business. What can I do if a key person, whether it be the owner or whether it be a key employee, gets crook, didn't see it coming, and it really impacts your business? What am I going to do? There's some financial things you can do. What are those things I can do?
Well, there's the main option of what you can do is how do you cover that person? So you are who you are, and you've got a person underneath you, or that's a part of your business, is how do you cover them when they're no longer income producing for you? So that's, and to be honest, the easy bit is if you've got money in the bank to be able to do it, then you go out there and start recruiting or do what you need to or start training. But the other thing to the side of that is having an insurance policy over their head. So if they're no longer there, which is they've passed away, you need to cover their recruitment costs, their training costs, everything as well. So you have an element of that. Two is if they can no longer work again. So again, sort of same scenario where they're exiting the business. And the third one is having like a trauma policy. So if they do get sick with like a cancer, heart attack, or stroke, there is a lump sum of money that comes in to be able to cover the business for that period of time. That can be for a director or a key person. Well, it's actually called key person insurance. So it's just the person underneath that. I think of if you're running an operation but you have a major salesperson that's there grinding it out and doing well for your business, how do you cover if that person's no longer there anymore?
That's the case of many illness.
Yep. Or if they pass away, the same scenario. If they pass away, it's like, well, you've got to go out there and start again, find a new person. So you cover their training costs, their recruitment costs, to be able to cover that. And then you've got a cash injection into the business to keep you going and be able to ride it out.
And by extension then, the classic question we did actually have here was, I'm in business with a person I chose to be in business with.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't choose to be in business with their husband.
Yes.
What happens if they die?
Well,
or I become illness?
First step is an agreement. So your first step above everything, you need to have an agreement with your respective directors. And then from there, how do you fund that agreement? So in that agreement would be things of if X is to pass away, who actually gets those company shares and how they're going to be paid for. It can get tricky when there's 3 or 4 different directors in the business, different shareholdings. There can be a major shareholder, a minor shareholder. Some people have got the ability to pay the other person out. If not, again, it goes back down to the insurance policy over their head. So example would be 2 directors, one owns 75% of the business, the other person owns 25% of the business. The person they still need an agreement with each other to say what would happen if 1, I was to pass away, or 2, there's a clause where how long you can actually carry someone for. So you might just say, look, we will carry you for 6 to 12 month period, but then after that a decision has to be made that you can no longer work again or you exit the business. And then that's where the funding comes in. So the person that might have 75% might be able to fund the person or buy out the person at 25%, but not vice versa. So that's when an insurance policy can come in, which is the same cover, life, disability, or a trauma policy where you can help someone out for that period of time.
So if anyone's in business with someone who's unrelated to them, probably worthwhile having a chat with Pablo, because have you got one of those policies, Michael?
Yeah.
So yeah, first step though is the agreement. So you've got to come up with an agreement with the other person firstly, or people, to say how what's a fair time frame, what it is, and that's when you have firstly the business valuation has to come in. There has to be an agreement on that. So it's a long process before you even get down to the funding mechanism.
And I ask this question with great trepidation, is to Michael, that's all well and good if the partner in the partnership actually dies or gets crooked. That's why we've got third party funding. What happens if your partner's underperforming or no good?
He talks to me.
That's not very cool.
Yes, that's very cool.
How do you deal with that from a HR, but also, because we're talking about risk here to your business and people, how do you deal with that?
Well, essentially, the best way, as I said before, if it's in writing, or stop fighting. So if you've got a shareholders agreement or something like that in place, that, you know, and there's some performance measures around, okay, we're in business together, but we agree that we're going to be doing this, this and this, and if it doesn't happen, then, you know, one of us has got to go, and the other person gets the right of, you know, to buy the other one out at a set figure. Again, it comes down to communication again, and putting it in writing up front, even when you've got all that experience, you can still go all over the shop. But the more that's in writing, the better. And yeah, certainly, it's a lot easier sometimes when you're in business if someone unfortunately does die, because it's cut and dry. There's the policies are there. It's when they're not completely nice that you've got to rely on documentation from someone like Anita.
And I would just from experience is the best way to start succession planning for that type of scenario is to play out scenarios if someone dies, because it takes out that whole hang on, is he talking about me type of aspect of if someone dies, that's your first step, and then we move into the voluntary stuff. Because the other thing, people have differentials in the ages. So it may not be they're underperforming, maybe they just want to retire. What do you do there? Well, if you've got an older partner, Michael, what would you do?
You angling it. Look after your elders, mate. There's wisdom there somewhere.
Sage advice.
That's right. No, it's I'm not quite sure where you're going with that, Tim. Actually.
I was going there about this. The issue there being that communication is the key. Start the conversation, because the reality is most people aren't brave enough to have the conversation, and it doesn't have to be personal. If you actually have the conversation before it's necessary, it makes life a whole lot easier.
And that's not just with partners, that's with your team as well. Have the conversation with your team about your expectations of both ways, of what you expect from them, from paying them, and what they expect from you. So the more you have those conversations, I know, Rod, you have quite a few with your team. I imagine from time to time.
Well, Bablo, is it less risky not to go into business with other people?
Not really, no. Is it less risky?
I mean, there's obviously risks with being
Well,
sole director.
depending on the business, depending on what you do. Yeah. It's not a one stop. People feed well and work well with each other, have different skill sets that can flourish under a business. So, yeah, it's either or. It also lacks some. You could be lacking a skill that you could come in.
Depends on you personally where you want to take your business. If you're happy with a certain level and you can do it on your own, great.
I've got a client who does
to
heap work out of engineering while out of the airport, and he does mechanical, and he's brought on a partner who's electrical, and they're now roaring in that as well. So, yeah, he wouldn't be where he is if he didn't have his offsider. So, yeah.
And get the agreements up front.
It's just to be honest. Wasn't due to conversation.
He did muck around with it at the start, so blame him.
Okay.
There's something special back there.
So,
I'm having moments.
Hopefully that's okay.
for you, Anita, is can you walk us through, we all employ people here, what is a great structure to have for our HR documentation? Like, how do we get it all packaged up and get it together?
Well, first off, I'll start with employment contracts, because you need to understand what each member of your team are doing, whether they're permanent, part-time, permanent, full-time, casual, or in sometimes contract subbies, but generally permanent or casual. And then look at that structure, look at their pay structures, make sure that that's all aligned and working properly, and then everything else that you're going to give your employees as benefits and features. Now, you have to abide by what, as I said before, federal laws, state laws, the NES, which is National Employment Standards, which are written an auspice by Fair Work Australia, and also then your awards that covers that, and if you're under an enterprise agreement, then you have to cover under what that says. As long as it's the same as or better than all of that, then that's a great place to start. You would then have the accompanying policies and procedures that go with that. So if you want to talk about they have to wear a uniform, I'd have a uniform policy to say, well, this is the standard that we want. This is what you need to have. In the case of health and safety, we need, it is a must that you have steel cap boots, high vis, eyewear, that sort of stuff, because you're now protecting yourself against a risk. So if they have an accident on site and work cover come out and they'll say, well, were they trained? Did you have policies? Did they sign this off? Did they do an induction? Did they do that? And if you keep going, no.
Like a SunSmart policy.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of things, and each obviously area is different and more pedantic than others, depending upon the level of risk you're doing as for a job. So you would have those policies attached to that, and then work procedures attached to that.
So let's say day one, someone walks in, it's a gizmo expense, a card in Helen, and starts employment. What should they actually physically get?
A new employee pack with, as I said, the employment contract with some policies that need to be signed off, and I would start with that, and then an induction of your expectations and of what you were requiring as far as their job, and most crucial, position description, so that everybody signs off on that and agrees that this is actually what we're going to do. Now, it can roll into, performance bonuses and things like that, and particular KPIs that people need to sign off if they're going down the track of getting bonuses as well. That all needs to be signed off and agreed as well. And you review that after 3 months and then after 6 months. So by law, if anybody's permanent, you get 6 months grace either side. The employee can walk, or you can walk the employee, as long as you go through a little bit of a process. And then if that doesn't work, if you need to terminate that employee because they're just not fitting into your organisation, then you're pretty much covered that you've followed all the steps and procedures needed so that they don't go to Fair Work and say, well, I was unfairly terminated. And it has happened where people have been paid out even in probationary period. Sometimes Fair Work, do things and we all shake our heads and go, we don't understand it. But it's really following a set of procedures and rules just to cover yourself, so that you've done everything humanly possible.
So what about an existing employee that's on a verbal agreement, and you decide to bring in a contract with all these policies that they don't necessarily agree with or don't want to sign?
You can't make them sign it. However, you can put in their employee file and write in big letters, had this discussion on this date, employee refused to sign.
So if you were to say bring in a uniform policy with your safety clothing and they decide that, well, no, I don't like that, I don't want to wear.
Then you've got, if there's grounds, because when you're looking after somebody's health and safety and somebody decides not to do that, then you have grounds to, as long as it's fair and reasonable, and that's, anytime we ever go to Fair Work Australia, the first questions they say is it fair and is it reasonable? And if you said, well, we were asked to wear earmuffs, but I refused, and they say, well, is that a fair and reasonable request on behalf of the employer? Absolutely, depending upon what the task is that you're asking them to do, because you're looking after their safety. We've said we've gone to nanny straits in most things, but that's because people are covering themselves. Sorry, I heard.
So in that case, with subcontractors, for the letter you guys talking about, so they come with us first work 1 week or 2 weeks with us. We know they are fit with us or not. Then we keep them forward. So in 1 or 2 week first, so if they got any risk happen, anything, so what should we do? We have to write the letter day 1 when they come?
So maybe I'll say it the way Harry, I think I'm understanding what you're saying here is around trial periods. So
Yeah, the first, first the subcontract and the construction side mostly. We don't know what kind of the worker they are.
Absolutely.
So in that case.
So if we walk through a scenario of young Josh decided to work in a wreckers yard, probably suit him, and say come in for a trial period, come in for 2 weeks, we'll see how you go. Can we pay him $10 a day? Does he have to sign up from day one? All that stuff that goes with it. You know, we don't even know what gear he's on, or anything like that. So how do we do that? That's the question you're asking, Harry. Is that what I said? Yeah.
Technically, they would be an employee and not a contractor, because it's the same scenario, whether they're with you for 5 minutes or 5 months, because you're just trialling them. I would put them on as a casual and trial them that way, so that you've got 1
Even
day,
ABN, yeah?
regardless if they've got an ABN. Yeah, they're still an employee, because just because you're trialling them doesn't make that okay. It's still the same scenario. If they're casuals, then by law, after 12 months, you have to have that conversation to say, okay, you've been a casual for 12 months. We have to have this conversation to say, well, do you want to become an employee or not? Now, that's not... You can all agree to remain casual, and you can remain casuals for 20 years if you want to, if everybody agrees on it. If the employee says, well, actually, I'd like to become permanent, if you have a good business model to explain the fact that this is the reason why I need to keep you as a casual, and it will pass a test at Fair Work, then that's fine. They may ask, you may have a very good reason or business case to argue no, because it could be seasonal work, it could be irregular, it's not permanent. However, if it's systematically and ongoing, that's a different story. And in other cases, I work with people where they're happy to keep casuals as casuals, and the casuals are happy to get that all-in rate and get paid the bigger bucks, which is, it works out the same, but because that's just how they want to get their salary.
Sorry, just quickly. If we have an agreement with our subcontractor that they would not like to be considered as an employee but a subcontractor, would that stand up? No. Okay. So if they were to agree to stay as a casual employee because they are wanting to keep their hourly rate, is that an option?
You can pay anybody an hourly rate of whatever you like, as long as it's above what the award states. So if you want to pay them $200 an hour, but bear in mind, you've got to then pay work cover, super and everything else. Okay. So that's where the rate would go down. And we all know that really the back end of why they've changed all of this is because they want people to contribute into superannuation. Yeah. Because what they want is self-funded retirees. Yeah, okay. So they're looking long-term, 20, 30 years down the track. So that's why they've actually changed that ruling about the ABN. Okay. That's one of the reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we just ask one question about putting on new employees and you have your 3-month probation?
6.
It's 6?
It's 6, yeah, by law. They changed it from 3 to 6 about 10 years ago.
Oh.
That's all right.
Okay,
but you can have it. You can have it less than that if you want to.
Oh, you can?
I would never ever suggest it,
but you should have, yeah.
But you've got, the longer you've got, the better.
The better price.
Yeah.
So what happens with that 6 month for the start? Do you give them a contract from start, or
Day
do you
one.
get through the probation and then do the contract?
No, I do the contract straight from day one.
Yeah, and I can share an example of we had a client pre-Christmas who had a young fella trial for him. It was a carpentry business, and he had a situation where Dad, a few months later, it didn't work out for him, and he received a call from the young fella's dad saying, "You pay your young fella under the rates. You've got to make this up," and all sorts of things. Fair Work and like stepped in and absolutely 100% had to pay the market rate from day one. Yeah, even though he as an employee. Yeah. You touched on casuals there, Anita. Can we just explore that a little bit further? That's been one of the big questions that's popped up. Is being, if I work 9 till 5, 5 days a week, can I be casual?
Certainly.
For how long?
12 months.
And then?
Then we have that conversation. But as I said, you have to have a very good business case as to why or why not they remain casual.
And by extension, the question was, then long service leave.
Yep.
Where does it start from? Did they all start as an employee?
From
or
day
did
one.
they start, or they all went and became permanent?
day one, because now the long service leave, it goes back to casuals now. They recognise it from day one. So they recognise long service leave in casuals as well as permanent employees now. That's just recently changed.
Okay. So I think it also leads to the fact that we need to have damn good payroll systems too, to be able to record the hours that people have worked for us over time.
Yeah. Because they'll make you do a retrospective. So if that person leaves, and in Victoria, if you make 7 years of employment, then you'll get pro-rata long service leave. You can't take it, but you will get paid it. So they will look retrospectively back, and if they've been on casual hours, they'll get you to do a retrospective of the hours. So it's really important and imperative that you monitor their start-finish times on a daily basis, and have a system that can pop you in and out. If you can do that.
So who wants to be an employer?
It's horrible. Yeah.
It's horrible. That's a good way to put it.
It is some days, yeah. It's a minefield.
I was going to switch though. At the end of the day, if the employer follows systems and has things in place, they can actually win, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not completely rigged against the employer.
Oh, no.
You want to share an example of one where you've had a win for an employer? Please, one. Desperately. Many a time, like the same question, somebody will ring up and say they've been underpaid or etc., or I know somebody in HR and you can't sack me, or you can't do this and you can't do that. If you've got the proper processes in place, yes, you can. You can follow a process and you can terminate somebody's employment as long as you have followed a process and procedure. And I'm currently working with some clients at the moment that are looking at a particular employee. She's been with them for about 3 months. And it's not so much that her work isn't fantastic, however it's a cultural fit. And they said this person is not fitting into the team. So you're allowed to also look at that as well. It's not just the work that they do. If that's under par, that's terrible. But also too, do they not fit your cultural values as how you want your team and your department and your work ethic to be? So you can also look at that. So we go through a process of counselling, and my advice is, okay, do their 3-month employment review, which they're doing next week. Talk about the things that are concerning you from a cultural point of view. There are some work issues. And then put a little bit of an action plan in place and say we'll review that in a month's time. If it hasn't changed at all, generally one of two things happen. The person realises that they're really not a cultural fit and they're not in the right job. Because people take a job and think, oh, this is going to be fantastic, and then realise in 10 minutes that it's not. And in the background they're looking for a new job while they're just plugging away at the old job. And they would more than likely jump if they know that they're being monitored and watched, and that it's plainly obvious that they don't quite fit your particular business. Yeah.
I was just asking Anita, sorry, about you hear on the radio at the moment all these solicitors going, if you think you've been unfairly treated and you've been managed out of it, call us. Yeah. Do you have much work? Or many clients coming in?
I just thought of a really nice story. I've got a client over the other side of town that are plumbers by trade, and they hired a young an apprentice and had been there for 6 months, and he had kept putting in that he wanted to go on holidays, and they said, well, A, you don't have enough leave, and B, the time that you're going, there's a couple of other people going away at the same time. And luckily they had all their employment contracts and stuff in place. And anyway, he kept sort of saying, oh, can't I go? And they kept going, well, no, your leave's not approved. And anyway, he had booked his holiday before he had asked. And he was going to Europe for 6 weeks with his friends. He went on that holiday, but on the Friday he was standing there crying in front of his supervisor saying, am I going to have a job when I come back? And the supervisor said, we've told you your leave actually isn't approved. So he went on that holiday, and so we did abandonment of employment. And then of course it was all happening via email, which I instructed the employer not to do, but anyway. And then he came back and then tried to sue them for $10,000 plus for ruining his holiday. And the enjoyment that he did not have, and that he then did not have a job when he came back. Guess who won? Exactly. He put it into Fair Work Australia because, of course, he knew somebody in HR who told him he had absolute perfect right to do what he was doing. He submitted his unfair dismissal through Fair Work Australia, and even they turned around and said, "You are kidding me. Find another job." So, see, it works. It works.
Documentation.
Yeah, documentation. But
What about the email thing you said?
technically, I would do it by snail mail.
Registered proof.
Just a letter to say you were meant to be at work on Monday at this time. We're just checking to see if you're all right.
Yeah.
And then you give them 3 strikes at that because we haven't heard from you. Blah 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 blah. Then you follow a process. And then when he doesn't come, it's abandonment of employment.
Sorry, so why do you use the postal instead of the email?
Because they're not going to report.
He's not there to pick up the money,
Yeah.
is he?
In that instance,
Unfortunately, his mother would have been.
Yeah.
However, but generally you do it by registered mail simply because you know then
It's
someone's
proof,
actually
it's
picked it
proof.
up.
Yeah.
Because if it goes electronically, you're not 100% certain that they could say, well, we never received that email. So whereas you send it by registered mail, somebody has to sign for it or else it comes back to say no one was there. It's just an evidence trail that you would use. So yeah.
Nice. A couple of them, we wrap up, have a cup of tea or coffee, here in the fridge. Bullying, might smile for this one.
What I do to you is not bullying.
No, well, this is the question. What's the difference between bullying and banter?
Or it's a fine line these days, yeah. You're right, perception is how people take it. I read something the other day that someone placed an ad and they said, you've got to be able to take a joke and be politically incorrect. Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore. But it comes down to perception and what we once thought as funny, probably not as funny. Well, probably still think it's funny, but you can't say it, can't do it. So,
What about if it carries on for years
yeah.
and then all of a sudden it turns nasty?
Yeah.
Have you got a call to say, well, it was all right for 4 years and then all of a sudden we had an argument?
What do you reckon?
Well, I suppose you've got precedent to fall back on, but you've also got to just cover what's actually going on and why did it all of a sudden turn to the other extreme, and what was behind that? Was it that they'd all been out for the Christmas party, and that's a HR nightmare, any Christmas party or social function. Had something actually, what was the actual event that triggered it?
Yeah.
And then you'd have to look at that. But it's very difficult in this day and age.
Yeah, certainly since I've been in business,
It's changed.
it's changed immensely.
Yeah.
Does there have to be a warning?
Yes,
As
you
a-
do
I'm
an
concerned
you
about
do an
like this.
investigation generally, and just see what the circumstances are. Generally, what you would be saying is, well, if we can all just shake hands and be happy, and then if it continues, and then we would probably suggest external training. And this is again where you have your policies in place about bullying and harassment, grievement procedures, that sort of stuff, because then you're following a process. Because again, if somebody anonymously rings Fair Work and says, I'm being bullied and nothing's being done about it, they'll say, well, do they have the correct policies in place? Have you been trained in that? Yes. Well, they'd say, you go back to your employer.
And that'll then
And they'll
have
follow the
something like you
process.
need to report to your
Yeah, so then we go through a process and then look at what the outcomes are. And sometimes it could be vexatious. It depends. There's a whole lot of... There could be something going on in the person's personal life that nobody was aware of, and all of a sudden they've just cracked and all of a sudden everything in the world is really bad, and that's when they've had that argument. And then they've gone, well, I'm being bullied, because they're nasty at the ward for something completely different. And when you ask them that question and they volunteer it, the answer, then it's, you know, you start working on the solution from there.
So you follow a process and
Yeah.
document.
Oh,
the discussion.
document everything.
Well,
Yeah.
And just to clarify that too, one day Rob walks in a bad mood and gives Juliana the rounds of the kitchen as a one-off event that she completely didn't deserve. Is that bullying?
No, bullying is classified as persistent and continuous and ongoing.
I'm working with my wife. We have that is bullying or
that is bullying.
Well, Harry, I know your wife.
Soon.
Yeah, she's really nice on her.
So we have arguments sometimes because we work 7 years together. So
Well, you
with
could
the quality
maybe-
of work
You
and lots
deserve
of
a
it.
medal, the pair of you deserve a
You
medal.
can issue a cease and desist.
We have worked together.
Good luck with that.
So lots of arguments, so no one listen to me, that's it. No, I have no like rights or documents, anything.
Now, that would be funny, taking over contract.
That's how the fight started.
That's
I
right.
have to keep recording, yeah?
So I reckon that great note, Harry. That's a great note to finish off. That's memorable. What I want to suggest here today is hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully there's been something there. Even if it frightened you, you feel like you're more informed. That's potentially the outcome that comes out of this. Because we want to make sure our clients are protected. So the three things just noted here were around Michael, Pablo and Anita here. If you want to talk about that asset protection that Michael talked about right at the start, grab the opportunity to grab him, not so much tonight, he's back up tonight, he's off to Echuca in the morning. Not tonight, sorry. So he's going to go through the roadworks at Romsey, that'll be good. See how they go. So he's going to head off there, he'll be out shortly, but book a time. Linda has got some stuff here, some feedback forms. Yep, if you want to book a time, just yell out and we can make one of those. If you want to talk to Anita about your employment issues, she's based here in Sunbury, so please, we use Anita's services, and please feel free to grab hold of that and have a chat to Anita. And if you are in business with people where you worry that they're going to die, or if or you're going to end up in business with your partner's boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, wife, you know, Harry's got the issue already.
That's with his own wife, you know.
You see the alarm bells, the alarm bells.
Grab Pablo, because it really is critical for businesses who have multiple owners and all key people. Your greatest risk is them getting crook, and you don't want that to happen either. So, but thank you very, very much. Thank you to Linda for putting those feedback forms out now.
I've just got it here, so.
Right,
So the one,
Tell me.
question, the superannuation.
Yes.
So the guys work with us like on the weekend sometime.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we should give them, they work on subcontract sole trader.
Good question. So superannuation is based around a concept called ordinary times earnings. And you need to, there's a chart, it's a really good chart on that. So if a guy's working, say, an extra weekend because it's outside their usual work hours, as a rule, that will not form part of their ordinary times earnings. So you don't have to necessarily pay super on that, but we can work you through that absolutely on a chart of what is super, what does cover super, and what doesn't. It's not a strict 9.5% of the wage. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. In actual fact, there's an opportunity for employers to pay slightly less super than what a lot of people do pay.
Yeah, every case is different.
But usually, can someone work with us? So we have to give him, just must have to give him if they work more than 3 months or from day one?
Your super
Subcontractor.
We'll have to work through whether a subcontractor or not, or an employee.
That's the first part.
That's the first part. And then potentially, if they're termed an employee or a worker, we have to pay super. They've only got to earn more than $450 in a month, and you're up for the super on that particular month.
And the hidden cost there too is anyone who's employing people on wages and subcontractor, you can actually get tipped over the payroll tax threshold. Because if they deem your subcontractors to be employees, that gets added to your wages. So if your wages and your super and those subbies who are deemed employees go over 650,000, you will have to pay payroll tax as well.
This might be a silly question, but can you please explain to me the definition of subcontractor?
No.
Anyone who's paid not as an employee. So.
But they're considered employees regardless.
That's
So-
right, absolutely,
So
yes.
this is what I'm saying, we float this word subcontractor around
Yeah.
so freely because it's just,
It's just another version of contractor in different dress.
Yeah, it's a hangover from years gone by.
Yeah.
You've got to look at each case and say, it's not a subcontractor or a contractor.
Yeah.
You can pay them as one,
yeah,
you just got to make sure that everything else they're entitled to as an employee
yeah,
is paid for as well.
Mm.
yeah. So, okay, so do we have a choice as business owners as to keeping them on a subcontractor rate or saying, well, okay, hang on a second, you guys are effectively employees,
Mm.
you should be on this award, and then they're actually receiving less?
You can pay them whatever if you wanted to put them as employees and
They
then
have to
you
be
did
under
your
that award.
workings out
Yeah,
for whatever the hourly rate you're paying them
Yeah.
as subcontractors,
yeah,
work it back
yeah,
that you have to accrue for annual leave,
Yeah.
sick leave, all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
Superannuation, take that rate back to
yeah.
whatever that dollar figure is, and it will be the same.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so-
what happens if we have to actually say they are employees, so they're, and you do work all that out, and it's actually going to be more than what we're paying them at the moment? Then what happens?
I just
In
work
their
it out
hourly
that it would
rate.
be exactly the same.
How do you work it out to be? So you have an agreement with them that that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Okay,
If you come on board,
Gotcha.
as an employee,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
pay you at $50 an hour,
Gotcha. Yeah.
which includes then 9.5%
Gotcha.
superannuation.
Yeah, okay.
We accrue if you have sick leave or annual leave, you get paid for that time off.
Gotcha.
So
And it accrues to what you're making at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So where can you find the true definition of a subcontractor?
So the best way
Yeah.
to use the tax office have a really good tool.
The ATO.
Yeah, you just Google employee contractor ATO
Tool.
tool. Yeah.
and Fair Work have one as well.
You'll
Thank you.
find that, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what Tim said before. Start playing with it because you can actually then, when you answer a certain way, you go, oh, okay, so if I answer that way,
Yeah.
I can actually become
Yeah,
a
So you work
contractor.
out-
So
you
that's
work
the way
out
I've got to
what's
structure my
your business.
agreements.
Mm. So I worked recently with, say, a chiropractor, and we had to then change everybody that worked for this chiropractor, whether they were Pilates instructors or whether they were practitioners of whatever sort, we actually had to change all of them across to be employees.
Employees. Okay.
Because they used the rooms, they had set rosters, they worked the same days every day, day in, day out.
Yeah.
The company got all their patients in, they weren't responsible for finding their own patients, they just booked in through reception, they used all of their equipment, they didn't bring anything with them.
Employees.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll duck
So,
test.
so when,
Yeah.
when does it get brought up? So if we don't mention anything to our subcontractors, they don't.
It's probably when the ATO
Is it going to
come.
happen through the ATO
Generally what would
eventually?
happen is, and how I work with, it would be somebody like one of these two,
Yeah.
would say to you when you're having your tax done, I have a little concern around this, maybe you might want to have a look at these subcontractors, or this
Yeah.
might be,
Have you noticed recently that with employee people, there won't be group certificates or pay-as-you-go payment summaries, you'll have single-touch payroll.
Yeah.
In certain industries, there's what's called a TPAR, a taxable payments annual report, so we have to tell the tax office who you've paid as a subcontractor.
Okay.
It's all data matching. They know exactly as an employee what you earn and as a subcontractor. They start matching that. When we do a tax return, we have to put the number of contractors, or the amount of contractors, and we also have to put in, do you pay employees, and then we have to put in how much superannuation. They do a match. And if you've got a high contractor, well, guess what? They might just do a little bit of a, we've had clients, just state revenue office, actually payroll tax. They just get the profit and loss from the tax office, and they'll just go, wages, superannuation, subcontractors, bang, 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 adds up over $650, we'll just pay them a visit. And as soon as that happens, and if there's an adjustment, guess what? Superannuation guarantee will be on the hotline,
Yeah.
and then a couple of others.
So here's another question for you. So if you employ someone as a subcontractor for a 12-month period,
Yep.
had a discussion with your accountant in regards to that person, moved them over across to as an employee.
Yep.
So that 12 months they were paid as a contractor, do I have to pay that super or anything?
You may still have to.
Right.
You may,
You
because
back pay,
you've got to look
Yeah.
at it.
That's why I'm asking
Yeah.
the question.
You've got to look at it and say, well, are they a contractor? These days, everyone you put on, you've just got to make the decision. Are they a contractor or employee? And you've got to do that up front.
Yeah. I've
So
learned
the
that lesson.
circumstances could change. You could actually have someone who starts off as either an employee or a contractor and then swaps over.
Yeah.
So, but
Well, we made that decision.
yeah, but you certainly, the tax office won't care if you've got them on a trial period. State Revenue Office won't care if you've got them on a trial period. They just go, are you paying them? On what basis are you paying them? If it looks like an employee, you've got to pay whatever the entitlements are.
Regardless, you should be paying their super, is what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, if they're an employee.
From day dot.
And if they've, yeah.
Say, for example, you engage someone to, let's say you got Chris and Simon, you got their business to do a roof, you got a builder, you got them to do the roof for you. They're not employee.
They're contractors.
Because they are separate. So you've just got to do that, work through that test. So don't necessarily just pay the super.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
all for that.
But when they're employing someone to do the roofing, that's where it could be more an employee relationship as opposed to you getting them in to do it. Because they can actually employ lots of other people. That's one of the tests.
Yeah.
So you're saying about the components, sort of, if you pay a subcontractor, you have to pay, like if you have an agreement to say that's the wage, that's the, whatever, the superannuation portion or whatever. So are you then having to pay the superannuation to their fund? Or if that's part of their
Good question.
subcontractor payment?
For years, we've always said, if you think they're going to be deemed an employee, don't trust the employer, the contractor to pay it. Plus, even if you do trust them to pay it, if the tax office come through and you've said that rate is an all-inclusive rate and it's for you to cover super, but if the tax office come through and say, no, you should be paying 9.5% on top of that. So you could actually get hit for super on top of what you've already paid.
I've actually had that happen with one client where he ended up that the employee basically ended up with double super.
Yeah.
Because he'd put the super, he actually done the right thing, put the super in under this agreement they'd had, and the tax office rolled in and said, oh, well and good, but we get, and they didn't charge any penalties, they said, we'll get you to try and do the right thing, but don't worry, you've breached the law, you need to
So
pay.
even though if it's in an agreement and
Yeah.
it's up to that subcontractor to pay.
Because
that
you
super.
haven't made a specific payment to a mandated super fund.
Right,
You've
your
given it,
obligations.
you haven't met your obligations, you've given it to the contractor.
Yeah.
Because as we said at the beginning, like, it's federal, state laws and that. If that changes, you have to go with that change, regardless of what agreement you may have
Yep.
in place. If it then is, tomorrow the law changes, you then have to change with that.
Yeah. So you're better to then not have an agreement and just put them on as an employee.
Under most circumstances.
I think 99%.
Depending, you've got to know each situation is
I think you,
singular,
you
so.
don't, you, I think it's got to be careful saying they're just
Yeah.
an employee. I wouldn't fall for that. No, treat each situation, have a look at each situation.
Yeah, each
Don't-
situation is unique.
Yeah, it's the default of saying they just go with the employee. You might be doing yourself a disservice.
But don't you think that the government's pushing that way?
Of course they are. But if
They
we're-
want
Yeah,
people to
that's
be
where it's going.
self-funded.
So
If-
subcontractors are going to be non-existent.
Yeah.
But if we're still playing
Yeah.
in the field,
Unemployment rate, try and cover it.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
A subcontractor that you hardly, you say you use someone once a year
Mm.
for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Do they still fall under,
yeah, contractor.
Contract.
Yeah, they're a contractor.
yeah,
It's like, say myself, if I came and did a consult for you and fixed something for you and wrote 3 employment contracts and then I never spoke to you again until you had another issue. I'm the true definition of a subcontractor. Same with these guys, you use them once a year or, and any other times. Well, you know, if you had a question, then you bring
Our
them.
best
in.
clients see us.
But that, you know, they're a specialised skill that you
And that's
only
what
need very
in
rarely.
in our industry, or, because we've got contracts with other people, it's stipulated that if we use subcontractors, they must have their own public liability
Yes.
cover,
Yeah.
and the onus is on us to make sure it's all up to date.
Yep.
So if they're there for that 3 hours once a year and something happens, their insurance covers it.
Yes.
And you're using Helen on a job by job basis
Yeah.
too.
Mm.
So that's a really.
That's a different, that's right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's see Vicky's. Have,
Let's drown our sorrows in a glass.
please take up, Linda will absolutely lynch me if we don't have some people feedback forms. Please do it for me. They'll suit me really well. Well, I thank Pablo, thank Anita, and thank you, Michael, for your time. Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for organising this. The reality is this comes out of clients asking us for sessions. If you want sessions on any topic to do with your business, just ask. We'll source someone who works in that field. This came out of this session. We had a session a few months ago on real estate in the local area, which again came from client request. So please let us know what you want. We're here to serve you. But thank you to you more than anyone else for coming out. It's a nasty sort of night, better than last night. But yeah, thank you for coming out. We really, really hope you got great value out of this.
Yeah.
And if we could ask one favour, if that's all right, if you did get great value out of it, would you mind telling other people that it was worthwhile, because they missed out, but we just want to share the message. Look, it's not all beer and Skittles, we get that with the message, but it's an important message because we want to make sure our clients and the broader community actually know what they need to do, because we don't like seeing businesses end up in trouble.